They're putting turbos on everything now, and you mark my words, in 5 years these engines are going to be grenading left and right. Toyota used to mean bulletproof. Now they're chasing fuel economy numbers and they're going to pay for it. That was Scotty Kilmer, hammering his garage workbench on a video from a few years back, the kind of rant his subscribers either rolled their eyes at or saved for later. Fast forward to the present, and Toyota Motor North America has formally filed a safety recall covering the V35A FTS twin-turbo V6 engine, the power plant under the hood of the latest Tundra, Sequoia, and Lexus LX 600. According to Toyota's filing with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, machining debris left inside the engine during assembly may cause catastrophic engine failure. The vindication, if you've been watching this story for years, is almost uncomfortable. Stick with me, because what's in this filing is bigger than one engine line. Here's why this matters, even if you don't own a Tundra, or a Sequoia, or a Lexus LX. The V35A FTS isn't some obscure power plant tucked into a niche trim. It's the headline engine for Toyota's flagship full-size truck, the Engine. That replaced the legendary 5.7-liter naturally aspirated V8 that made the previous Tundra a 30-year resale champion. Toyota staked its reputation on this engine. It told the market that a twin-turbocharged 3.5-liter V6 could do everything that big old V8 did, but cleaner, more efficiently, with more torque. And in spec sheet terms, it does. The issue isn't the design philosophy on paper. The issue is what happens when you push a small displacement engine to make V8 equivalent power around the clock, then introduce a manufacturing variable that wasn't accounted for. That's the conversation we should have been having 3 years ago. We're having it now because the recall notice forced it. The recall, as the recall notice indicates, covers an initial population estimated above 100,000 vehicles in the United States, and supplemental campaigns have since extended scrutiny across the broader engine line, with totals climbing toward 1.2 million vehicles when you fold in international markets and the related service campaigns. NHTSA recall identifier 24V789 is the docket most owners are quoting, though Toyota's internal safety recall number tracks separately. If you're keeping score at home, that's not a small action. That's a flagship tier corrective campaign on the company that built its modern brand on the idea that its engines simply do not break. Pause on that sentence for a second. Now to Scotty. You don't have to like the guy. A lot of credentialed mechanics find his delivery cartoonish, and a lot of automotive journalists have rolled their eyes at his hot takes for 15 years straight. But on this specific call, the warning that Toyota was moving too complex too fast, that twin turbocharging combined with direct injection on a small displacement engine was a long-term reliability gamble, that the brand was sacrificing the bulletproof character that made it Toyota in the first place. He was beating that drum well before this filing existed. He warned about heat soak and tight turbo packaging. He warned about carbon buildup on intake valves and direct injected engines. He warned about bearing loads in engines making specific output numbers that used to require a much bigger block. You can pull the videos, they're time-stamped. The pattern Scotty was describing isn't unique to Toyota. It's the entire industry's bet. Downsizing, force-feeding, leaning out, and chasing fleet fuel economy averages while still delivering the power numbers customers expect. Ford's EcoBoost line has been through its own reliability conversations. GM's small displacement turbo engines have had their moments. BMW, Audi, Hyundai. Every manufacturer running this playbook has hit some version of the same wall. What made the Toyota story different is that Toyota was supposed to be the company that didn't take this bet, or at least took it last and took it carefully. The V35A FTS recall is the moment that narrative cracked. And the cracks were visible to anyone watching the engineering trends, not just a guy yelling in front of a Celica. Now let's talk about what's actually happening inside these engines, because the mechanism matters. Toyota's filing describes machining debris, small metallic particles generated during the manufacturing of internal engine components, specifically around the connecting rod and crankshaft journal areas, that may not have been fully cleaned out before final assembly. Picture a wristwatch movement, the kind with hair-spring-thin gears meshing dozens of times a second under spring tension. Now imagine a single grain of sand wedged between two of those gears. The watch will run for a while, it might run for months, but every tick is grinding that grit deeper, and every tick is shedding more material into the movement. Eventually the gears bind, or the pivot wears through, and the whole thing stops dead. That's the cascade we're talking about, except the watch movement spins 6,000 times a minute and produces 437 horsepower while it does it. Here's the bearing failure cascade in slow motion. The crankshaft in your engine doesn't actually touch the connecting rods directly. It rides on bearings, thin, curved shells of soft metal, usually a layered alloy, that sit between the rod and the journal. Between the bearing and the journal is a film of pressurized oil only a few microns thick. That oil film is what's holding the engine together while it spins. The bearing isn't really a bearing in the mechanical sense. It's a precisely shaped channel that maintains the geometry of that oil film. When a particle of machining debris circulates through the oil system and lodges itself in that microscopic gap, the oil film breaks down at that point. Metal touches metal. The bearing material, which is intentionally softer than the crankshaft, starts to gall and erode. As it erodes, the clearance opens up. As the clearance opens up, oil pressure in that bearing drops. As oil pressure drops, the next particle to come through has an even easier time wedging in. This is the part of the story where you stop and think about how an engine actually decides to fail. It's almost never a single event. It's a cascade, a slow degradation that hits a threshold and then unzips fast. By the time you hear the knock, by the time the oil pressure light comes on, by the time the engine starts pulling timing to protect itself, the damage trajectory has been running for thousands of miles. Coffee grinder analogy, if the watch movement didn't land for you, drop a single peppercorn into a high-end burr grinder and run it. The first few seconds, you'll hear it. The blades will catch, jam slightly, and then chew through. But the moment that pepper grit gets between the burrs and the housing, the precision tolerance that lets the grinder produce a consistent grind is gone forever. You can keep using it. The output will get worse and worse. The cost of that one peppercorn is the entire grinder. Toyota's filing acknowledges that affected engines may exhibit symptoms including engine knocking, oil consumption above normal thresholds, and in worst-case scenarios, complete loss of motive power while the vehicle is in operation. That last phrase, loss of motive power, is the one that put this into NHTSA recall territory rather than a service bulletin or a goodwill campaign. A truck that stops making power while merging onto a highway with a trailer behind it is a safety event, not an inconvenience. That's why this filing exists. That's why the campaign is mandatory and not optional. You should hold on to that distinction because Toyota's PR will frame this as proactive corporate citizenship, and the regulatory paperwork tells a slightly different story. Scope-wise, the recall notice indicates affected production date ranges spanning roughly the 2022 through 2024 model years for the Tundra and Sequoia, with Lexus LX 600 inclusion across overlapping production windows. Toyota's filing identifies specific assembly periods and specific component lot numbers as the primary risk population, though the company has acknowledged that the remedy, which involves engine inspection and, in many cases, full engine replacement at zero cost to the owner, is being extended on a precautionary basis to a wider VN range than the strict probability of failure would dictate. Translation: they're replacing engines in trucks that probably would have been fine, because they don't want to be wrong about which ones won't be. That's expensive. That's the kind of expensive that shows up in quarterly earnings calls. Here's a retention check. If you're still with me, you already understand more about how modern engines actually fail than 90% of the people who will drive these trucks off the lot next year. Keep going, because the next part is where the story gets harder to dismiss as a one-off manufacturing fluke. Toyota's defense, as presented in the filing and in the company's public statements, is essentially this. The V35A FTS is a well-engineered power plant. The recall is the result of a specific manufacturing process, variable that has been identified and corrected. The company is acting decisively, transparently, and at significant cost to ensure customer safety. Engine replacements are being authorized. Loaner vehicles are being provided through dealer networks. The remedy is comprehensive. And on the surface, all of that is true. Toyota is doing the right things now that the problem has been confirmed. The proactive engine replacement program is the kind of action that other manufacturers in similar situations have not taken, and credit where it's earned. That's a meaningful response. But the timeline question is the one nobody at Toyota wants on the record. When did the internal data on these failures cross the threshold from anomaly to pattern? Owner complaints on Tundra forums, on Lexus owner groups, on the popular long-term ownership review channels were stacking up well before the formal recall filing landed at NHTSA. Posts describing engine knock at low mileage, posts describing complete engine seizures under towing loads, posts where dealership service writers reportedly told customers that there was no known issue and to monitor the situation. The recall notice doesn't address the gap between the first internal awareness and the public disclosure. That gap is where the harder questions live. The recall, as the recall notice indicates, addresses the defect going forward. It doesn't timestamp the moment Toyota knew. This is where the Scotty Kilmer thread reconnects, because his broader argument was never really about predicting this exact recall. It was about pattern recognition. When a brand built on conservative, over-engineered, naturally aspirated longevity pivots to high-output, force-fed, small-displacement engines on its flagship truck platform, the risk profile of the entire product line changes. You can manage that risk well, and Toyota has more institutional engineering depth than almost any other automaker on the planet. But you can't make the risk profile go back to what it was. The 5.7-liter V8 that the V35A FTS replaced was a known quantity. 300,000 miles was the floor for a maintained one. The new engine is making more power, more torque, with less displacement, under more thermal stress, with more components that have to coexist precisely. The recall is the manifestation of that increased complexity meeting a manufacturing reality. So what do you actually do with this information? Here's the practical playbook. If you own a Tundra, Sequoia, or LX600 from the affected production range, the first action is a VIN check. Toyota's recall lookup tool, accessible through the standard owner portal channels, and through NHTSA's public recall database, will tell you in under a minute whether your specific vehicle is in the affected population. If your VN comes back, as included in the campaign, the next step is contacting your dealer service department to schedule the inspection and remedy. Toyota's filing indicates that loaner vehicles are to be provided during the service period, and that the engine replacement remedy is performed at no cost to the owner. Document everything. Keep the paperwork. If you've already paid out of pocket for related repairs, reimbursement procedures are part of the campaign. If your VN is included and you're currently experiencing symptoms, knocking sounds from the engine, abnormal oil consumption, oil pressure warnings, hesitation under load, do not drive the vehicle aggressively. Do not tow with it. Do not run it at sustained high RPM. Get it to a dealer as quickly as you can manage and have the conversation about whether it should be driven there or trailered. The recall notice indicates that loss of motive power is a potential failure mode, and that's not a risk profile compatible with highway towing or hard acceleration. Drive gently, drive locally, get it in. That's the cautious read, and in a YMYL context, that's the only read. If your VIN comes back as not included, the work isn't quite done. The broader engine line has been under enough scrutiny that monitoring your own vehicle's behavior is reasonable due diligence even outside the recall window. Pay attention to oil consumption between changes. A modern direct-injected turbocharged engine that's consuming more than half a quart between recommended service intervals is telling you something. Listen for knock or rattle on cold start, particularly under light load before the engine reaches full operating temperature. Watch for any check engine codes related to misfires, oxygen sensor performance, or cam timing variants. None of these individually means your engine is failing. All this of them together, over a short period, is a pattern worth bringing to your dealer's attention. And independent of any of that, if you bought one of these trucks in the affected production range, make sure your maintenance records are airtight. Stick to the manufacturer recommended oil specification, and not the cheap version of it. The factory spec oil for these engines isn't a marketing upsell. It's a thermal and shear tolerance call that matters more in a small displacement turbocharged engine than it did in the old V8. Change intervals matter more, not less, when the engine is under higher specific load. Document the changes. Keep receipts. If you ever need to make a warranty case or a goodwill case outside the formal recall, that paper trail is the difference between a covered repair and a contested one. Here's the harder, longer frame thought to sit with. The V35A FTS recall is not the end of the conversation. It's an early data point in a larger industry-wide reckoning with what happens when every major manufacturer chases the same downsizing, force-feeding, direct-injecting playbook simultaneously. Toyota will fix this engine. The remedy will work. The replacement engines, manufactured with the corrected process, will likely run for the long haul that Toyota buyers expect. But the broader question, whether the bet on small displacement boosted engines as the universal replacement for the simple, naturally aspirated motors of the past 2 decades was the right long-term bet, is still being answered. Recalls like this one are part of how that answer gets written. Scotty was loud about the question. He wasn't always right about the specifics. On this one, the specifics caught up to him. If you own one of these trucks, run the VIN check today. Not tomorrow, today. Share this with anyone in your circle who's driving a Tundra, a Sequoia, or a Lexus LX600. They need to know whether their vehicle is in the affected population, and they need to know before they tow a boat across 3 states this summer. Drop a comment if you've already been through the recall process, because other owners watching will want to know what the dealer experience actually looked like. Subscribe if you want the follow-up when the supplemental campaigns expand, because based on the pattern, they will. And if you've got a story about an engine that failed before the recall landed, tell it in the comments. The timeline question doesn't get answered without owners speaking up. Watch the next one. It's about which manufacturer is most likely to file the next recall like this. The short list is shorter than you'd think.